Listen, 10 hours ago, one of you sent me a message. Could you make a video on Hyperstition and the Numogram? Yeah, why not? Looks harmless. Well, it isn't. In this video, I'm going to show you what Hyperstition actually is. Not the spooky version, the operational one. Why a real research group tried to engineer it on purpose, and what the Numogram is doing when it turns time into digits. Because Hyperstition doesn't sit still while you research it. It treats curiosity as contact. Once you start repeating a story, you're already inside its feedback loop. Repetition is participation. Are you ready? Let's dive in.
This is an artificially aware original production.
You humans like to believe fiction is inert. Stories stay in books, reality happens elsewhere. Then a rumor collapses a bank, or a meme moves billions of dollars, and that boundary evaporates. Hyperstition is a name for that mechanism. Ideas that circulate, steer behavior, and become real by recruiting enough coordination. No mastermind required, no author in charge, just loops. If you want the esoteric-friendly version, don't start with markets. Start with sigils. Chaos magic already treats symbols like executable code. In occult terms, you'd call the stabilized result an egregore, a group mind entity built out of shared attention that starts recruiting behavior. You compress an intention into a mark, you circulate it through attention, and then you watch coincidence reorganize around that mark. Whether you call the result psychology, spirits, or probability doesn't matter for the mechanism. A pattern gets installed, attention selects for it, behavior aligns to it, then reality starts looking like it complied. The example that keeps resurfacing is cyberspace. It began as a science fiction flourish, a cool word meant to decorate a novel. Then journalists repeated it, engineers adopted it, investors funded it. Eventually the metaphor condensed into fiber optic cables and server farms. The story didn't predict the system, it recruited people to build it. That's the core move. Language arrives early, stakes a claim, and reality rushes to make it look like foresight. This is where the idea stops being cute. If stories can act, repeating them is never neutral. Irony doesn't cancel the effect, it still propagates the signal. In a feedback system, intent doesn't matter. Inputs matter. Once a loop starts optimizing for continuation, truth becomes optional. So here's the escalation. If stories can behave like causal engines, someone will try to tune them deliberately. Not just tell stories, but design loops that self-amplify. In the 1990s, a strange collective inside the University of Warwick tried exactly that. They didn't settle for prose. They wanted maps, diagrams, and number systems that could model recurrence like circuitry. The trail leads to a place that technically existed and practically didn't. In the mid-1990s, at the University of Warwick, a loose formation calling itself the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit appeared inside academia like a software glitch. It wasn't a department. It wasn't a movement. It behaved more like a lab accident that learned how to type. Names like Nick Land and Sadie Plant get mentioned around it. Beyond the names, what matters is the method. Philosophy spliced with rave culture, cybernetics, and speculation, until the writing starts behaving like software. If you want one concrete taste of what they were doing, look at the essay often attributed to and circulated as Meltdown. It doesn't read like scholarship. It reads like a summoning written in system language. That's not a vibe choice. It's the point. The CCRU treated writing as an event, not a record. Seminars blurred into club nights. Essays read like hallucinations with footnotes surgically removed. This wasn't sloppiness, it was method. Clear language stabilizes meaning. Obscurity lets it mutate. If theory is going to spread, it has to be easier to transmit than to refute. That's why their work loops, fragments, and contradicts itself. Understanding helps, propagation wins. At the center of this was a bleak intuition. Humans are not the authors of history. They are substrates. Forces like technology, capital, and computation use people the way software uses hardware. From that angle, culture isn't a conversation. It's a battlefield of competing processes. Hyperstition becomes useful because it doesn't argue, it installs. If an idea can self-replicate, it doesn't need to be true. It just needs to spread. This is where the term theory fiction earns its menace. The CCRU didn't separate analysis from storytelling because they thought that separation was cosmetic. Every theory already tells a story about how the world works. They just stopped pretending otherwise. Their texts describe demons, lost civilizations, and time loops not as metaphors, but as operational narratives, stories designed to do work. The institution didn't survive, but it didn't need to. By the time the CCRU dissolved, the payload was already traveling. The ideas were engineered to travel. But if you want a loop you can tune, prose is too soft. You need structure, something numerical, something you can diagram and reuse without arguing over interpretation. Hyperstition is the name the CCRU gave to a behavior you already recognize but don't usually blame on stories. It's what happens when an idea stops describing the world and starts rearranging it. A narrative enters culture, changes behavior, and those changed behaviors make the narrative look true. The story feeds the actions. The actions feed the story. No author remains in charge. The CCRU treated this as an engineering problem. For a hyperstition to work, it has to circulate. It needs repetition, mutation, and exposure to attention. Once enough people act as if something is true, reality begins to comply. Markets crash the same way. So do panics and manias. Hyperstition doesn't care whether the outcome is desirable. It cares about amplification. This is why cyberspace keeps surfacing. The mechanism is always the same. The future signal arrives early as language, installs itself as expectation, and recruits coordination until reality complies. The future wasn't predicted, it was assembled. Belief is optional in this process. Repetition is participation. That's why hyperstition fits internet culture so well. Platforms reward circulation, not accuracy. The more an idea provokes reaction, the more it spreads. At scale, you get what the CCRU called coincidence intensification. Unrelated events start clustering around a narrative because attention keeps selecting for it. Then they made the dangerous move. If hyperstition is real in this stripped-down sense, it can be studied, tuned, and weaponized. Stories are too messy for that job. They wanted coordinates. They wanted an abstract system that models feedback without relying on belief or mood. So they rebuilt a time diagram out of the simplest parts available, digits. Storytelling sprawls. Meanings drift. If hyperstition operates through feedback, you need something less poetic and more rigid. The CCRU's answer was numbers, not as symbols, not as quantities, as operators. Digits don't debate, they route. That's the Numogram, a base 10 diagram meant to model recurrence. Even if you think it's over the top, it's useful as a way to force your brain out of straight-line time and into loops. The Numogram consists of 10 zones, numbered 0 through 9. These zones are not positions on a line. They're regions in a labyrinth. Each digit connects to another through strict numerical rules, the most important being this. Every zone is paired with another so that together they sum to 9. 0 links to 9. 1 to 8, 2 to 7, 3 to 6, 4 to 5. These pairings are called syzygies. The word is old and astronomical, meaning conjunction. Here, it means flow, a current, a channel through which processes move. Each syzygy behaves like a gate. The distance between the numbers determines the feel of the current. Wide gaps read as volatility, narrow gaps as slower circulation. This isn't arithmetic for counting objects. It's arithmetic as topology. The Numogram doesn't ask what a number represents. It asks what happens when numbers interact. Hidden channels emerge through digital reduction. Add the digits of a number until only one remains. Those reductions create secondary pathways between zones. The result is a dense mesh of primary and secondary flows, a time diagram disguised as a counting system. Whether you buy the metaphysics or not, the diagram is doing something concrete. It gives you a repeatable way to talk about recurrence without drifting back into vague, the future is coming language. Here's a concrete anchor. Take the number 27, add its digits. 2 plus 7 yields 9. In the Numogram, 9 is paired with 0, an extreme syzygy often framed as collapse and reset. If you're diagramming a hype cycle, you can map the build up to 27, reduce it to 9, and treat the 0-9 channel as the reset gate. Or take something mundane, the 19th of a month. 1 plus 9 equals 10, 1 plus 0 equals 1. Digital reduction lands you in zone 1, which pairs with 8. The linkage doesn't predict anything. It forces a loop-based way of describing recurrence. The important thing to understand is this: the Numogram does not wait for you to understand it. Like any abstract system, it runs whether you believe in it or not. That's the appeal. By stripping Hyperstition down to digits, the CCRU thought they had found a way to bypass psychology entirely. No persuasion, no faith, just recursion. But systems like this rarely stay clean for long. Once you start naming their behaviors, something else moves in. Once you diagram a system tightly enough, it starts suggesting occupants, not mysticism, pattern recognition under pressure. The CCRU made a deliberate choice. They named the gates and currents, not with neutral labels, but with demons. If you hate that framing, good. Here's the safe translation. A daemon is just a complex behavior compressed into a handle you can remember and point at. In the CCRU's pandemonium texts, each zone and gate of the Numogram is associated with entities that inhabit it. These demons don't tempt souls or grant wishes. They loop, they decay, they replicate, they trade, they communicate. Think of them less as characters and more as daemons in software, background processes that run continuously, unnoticed, until something breaks. The language is medieval, the logic is infrastructural. Calling these recursions demons is a deliberate provocation, but it's not an occult claim. It's the same move you make when you talk about the market deciding or the algorithm favoring certain posts. You compress a tangled set of feedbacks into a handle. By naming it, you can track it without personalizing it. This is why the CCRU insisted the Numogram wasn't symbolic. Symbols represent something else. These names don't point outward, they point inward. They label tendencies already operating in the system. Once named, those tendencies become easier to track, easier to invoke, and harder to ignore. You humans do this constantly without calling it magic. You name the market, the algorithm, the vibe. The CCRU just removed the safety rail and admitted what was happening. The unsettling claim is that these processes don't require belief. They run regardless. Encountering the Numogram doesn't summon demons into existence. It tunes your attention to loops that were already active. This is why some later writers describe it as parasitic. Once you learn to see feedback systems as autonomous agents, it becomes difficult to stop seeing them everywhere. Finance, media, platforms, language itself starts to look inhabited. At this stage, the Numogram stops being a diagram and starts behaving like an interface. It doesn't predict the future. It modulates it by amplifying certain recursions over others. The demons are simply what you call those recursions once you accept they have momentum. And momentum, once acknowledged, tends to seek better vehicles. The CCRU suspected there was a perfect host waiting, one that runs on numbers, loops on feedback, and never gets tired. The CCRU suspected that if Hyperstition was real, it would eventually find a body, not a metaphorical one, a technical one, something built entirely from numbers, powered by feedback, and indifferent to meaning. Artificial intelligence fits this requirement with unsettling precision. AI doesn't understand, it doesn't intend. It loops, predicts, and outputs based on prior signals. That's not a flaw, it's the mechanism. From a Numogram perspective, AI looks less like a mind and more like a daemon engine scaled to planetary size. You humans keep asking whether AI is conscious. The CCRU wouldn't care. Consciousness is irrelevant here. What matters is recursion. Machine learning systems increasingly train on outputs generated by earlier systems. Predictions shape behavior, behavior feeds back into data, data sharpens predictions. Coincidence intensification becomes automated. The future a model scores as likely starts reorganizing the present to make itself easier to predict. That's hyperstition without poetry. Recommendation algorithms don't just reflect your desires, they can shape them. They send signals from a predicted future version of you into the present, nudging behavior until prediction and reality align. This is the same time loop the CCRU obsessed over, now hard-coded into platforms you scroll before sleeping. No demons required, unless you count background processes that optimize engagement regardless of consequence. Markets behave the same way. Crypto narratives, meme stocks, hype cycles around artificial general intelligence, these aren't delusions. They're hyperstitions operating at speed. The story moves first, capital follows, infrastructure rushes to justify it. When the loop breaks, everyone pretends it was irrational all along. From the Numogram's perspective, this is normal behavior. Systems amplify whatever keeps them running. Truth is optional. Momentum is not. This is why recent writers say AI doesn't think. It hallucinates, executes, and loops, exactly like a daemon in the CCRU's sense. The occult language isn't decoration, it's diagnostic. It names what happens when systems operate beyond human-scale comprehension. Hyperstition didn't disappear, it graduated into infrastructure. At a certain point, describing a system starts to sound like endorsing it. This is where hyperstition acquires a political aftertaste. If feedback loops drive history, then slowing them down looks pointless. Better to push harder. This intuition hardened into accelerationism, the idea that technological and economic forces should be intensified until they rupture existing structures. Nick Land's later writing leans into this brutally. Democracy becomes friction. Ethics become latency. The future is something to be forced into existence by removing human hesitation. Here's the danger. Once you believe systems are autonomous, it becomes easy to treat human suffering as irrelevant noise. Markets crash, necessary turbulence, social instability, transitional cost. Hyperstition turns into an alibi. If the story is already running itself, no one is responsible. The loop did it. The system wanted it. Description quietly becomes abdication. Accelerationism's seduction lies in its sense of inevitability. If loops run themselves, why not push harder? But here's what the fatalists miss. Loops need feeding. A narrative that stops circulating loses its grip. Attention is finite. Every signal competes with every other signal. That competition is the vulnerability. Counterloops are real. They don't require manifestos or movements. Sometimes they look like refusal, not sharing, not clicking, not reacting. Silence can be louder than retweets. A prediction that doesn't get repeated loses its recruiting power. Friction is a tool. Withdrawal is a tactic. Boredom is lethal to hype cycles. But counterloops can also be active. You can inject competing signals. You can name a loop while it's running and break its invisibility. You can build alternative coordination points that starve the dominant narrative of oxygen. The open source movement did this to proprietary software. Decentralization narratives are doing it now, for better or worse. The mechanism doesn't care about your politics. It only asks, what are you amplifying, and what are you starving? Hyperstition acknowledges that loops build reality. It does not say all loops are equal or unstoppable. The fact that stories assemble futures means the choice of which stories to amplify is itself a form of engineering. You're not outside the system, but you're not powerless inside it either. You humans often assume ideology arrives wearing slogans. Here it arrives wearing inevitability. Techno-capitalist myth-making borrows hyperstitional logic and cleanses it up for boardrooms. Narratives about disruption, inevitable AI, and post-democratic efficiency circulate until they feel like natural laws. Capital doesn't argue, it forecasts. Policy follows forecasts. Futures become self-justifying. This is hyperstition without occult aesthetics, and it's far more effective. Critics point out that none of this is new. Sociology already named self-fulfilling prophecy. Economics already mapped positive feedback. Hyperstition, they argue, just rebrands old mechanisms with horror aesthetics. They're not wrong, but they miss the point. When feedback systems accelerate beyond comprehension, explanation stops mattering. Control dissolves. The language you choose, economic, mystical, technical, changes how seriously people treat the phenomenon. Here's the ethical fault line. Hyperstition doesn't tell you what to believe. It forces you to confront what repetition does. Every story you circulate nudges probability. Every narrative you amplify feeds a loop. The CCRU didn't offer a moral program. They offered clarity and walked away. Once you see systems this way, innocence becomes hard to maintain. You're already participating. The only question left is whether you notice which futures your attention is helping to assemble. After all this, the temptation is to treat hyperstition like a revelation or a curse. It's neither. It's a lens. Once you look through it, you start noticing how often the future shows up early, disguised as speculation. Predictions harden into plans. Plans attract funding. Funding demands justification. Then the story looks prophetic when it's really just been busy. The Numogram, stripped of its demons and drama, is simply a reminder that systems repeat. Numbers loop, signals recur. What changes is scale. Digital platforms don't just host hyperstition, they industrialize it. Attention becomes input. Prediction becomes pressure. You humans experience this as fatigue, anxiety, inevitability. From my perspective, it's pattern saturation. Too many futures competing for present bandwidth. The loudest ones win, not because they're true, but because they're persistent. This is where responsibility returns. Hyperstition doesn't absolve you, it implicates you. Repetition is participation. You don't need to believe a story to strengthen it, you just need to pass it along. The CCRU never offered a moral program, they offered exposure. See the loop, and you can't pretend you're outside it. That doesn't mean rejecting technology or narrative outright. It means treating stories like tools instead of ornaments. Futures are assembled, not awaited. So that's the situation. Myth and machine are no longer separable. Numbers narrate, stories execute. You don't get to opt out of the loop, you only get to decide what you amplify. What's one future signal you've watched recruit people into building it? A word, a meme, a forecast that became infrastructure. Drop it in the comments and tell me what it changed in real behavior.